Hey guys, Mr. Halpin here. Today we have a very special guest coming on for the first time.
First time? Yours was the first time last time. So.
I know, but still, it's your first time doing this. But regardless, though, we're really excited because today we're going to go over the Chapter 11 study guide, and we're going to help you create this as an additional resource that you can use to review. Did I say rule? Review along with your study guide. So
let's go ahead and start with chunk 1. If you notice at the top of each study guide, we basically have a list of vocabulary words. And that doesn't mean that you're necessarily limited to these words, but these are going to be the main words that will help you understand the terminology. When you're reading through, we try to boldface every vocabulary word and then underline it. And usually in parentheses after that, it'll give you the definition. So let's go ahead and start with this first.
Yeah, that sounds good to me. So the first thing that this is kind of saying, this section up at the top is saying right here, guys, it's saying that initially the founders, they separated the Constitution, or they separated our government into 3 branches, but they also wanted to divide the state government from the federal government. And this division between the state and federal government is known as federalism. Right there.
And if you remember, I always do that airplane mode when we were dealing with the king before we had become our own country. We were really heavy with the king having all the power. So really that was more of your federal government having the power. Then we went to the total opposite when we created our first Constitution, the Articles of Confederation, which ended up giving the states the complete power. Then we realized that's not working either. Therefore, now we kind of balanced it out, and we have part of the power going to the federal government, part of the power going to the states.
Exactly. So let's get on to this next paragraph right here, guys, which is reserved powers. Now, when we use this term reserved powers, we really want you guys to think it's the power reserved for the states. We'll go into all the other powers too that we'll need, but right now, when you guys see enumerated or delegated powers, please don't get this confused. This is saying the powers that are specifically listed in the Constitution. And the powers listed in the Constitution, those go to the federal government. Now, if they're not listed in the Constitution, those powers are reserved, again, for the states. Now, the amendment that makes this all possible for the states is the 10th Amendment. And that's why we have that all in that paragraph.
Okay, so let's look at the next little bullet point where it's talking about the supremacy clause. And of course, with the supremacy clause, it basically just states that your federal laws will always override your state laws. Okay, so it's supreme, it's above all.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And for this next part right here, guys, and we're going to scroll on down to concurrent powers. When we say concurrent powers, we want you to think those powers again. The concurrent powers, we want you to think those powers that are given to both the federal and to the state government. And there's a wide variety, and you can see some of those in this chart right here, which we'll go over. But some of the concurrent powers are taxing both the states and the federal government are able to tax. They both can borrow money. They both can provide for the general welfare. They both can legislate and enforce laws, and they both can create court systems too.
Okay, so this chart, like we stated in class, the left one, we basically wrote the word enumerated powers above exclusive federal powers to be a little more consistent. So the federal government is the one that can actually go in and print the money, and they regulate the value and interstate commerce, the trade. No way could a state ever decide that they're going to go and declare war. That is simply left for the federal government.
Can you imagine what Alabama would do if they had that power?
Oh, dear, that might be interesting. and then, of course, managing relations with foreign countries. States are not supposed to be jumping in and speaking for our nation.
Exactly right.
Okay?
And again, reserved powers, again, when we say reserved powers, please, guys, think the powers that are reserved for those states. So again, right here, you got a couple, couple reserved powers. You have regulating elections, guys. You have the state internal commerce. You have establishing local governments, establishing and maintaining the militia, and providing for the health, safety, and education of citizens. Guys, when you see that word education, that really has to be a giveaway for you that you are thinking of the states. Anything to do with education is referring to the states.
Okay, good. So now we're going to go on down and we're going to look at the growth of federal power. And of course, what really allowed federal power to grow was the whole concept of the elastic clause that's found in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. And it basically said that if there's an enumerated power that your federal government has, and if they need something to help them make that power happen, they can do it, which is your implied powers. For instance, in the Constitution, it didn't necessarily say anything about having a draft. However, in order for the president to accomplish his tasks with your military, if the military was not as populated as needed in times of war, they could implement the draft. So that was an implied power that allowed the federal government to accomplish their powers.
Mm-hmm. Now, this next paragraph right here, guys, this is really the start of chunk 2 on your study guide. Now, this first paragraph right here is really just saying that there are similarities between the current Florida Constitution and the U.S. Constitution. Specifically, if you look at here, you're going to see that they both start, again, with a preamble. Then they have a series of articles. And lastly, they have amendments. So they're very, very similar documents.
Very much. And of course, again, both documents have a preamble, articles, and amendments, and they both actually start with "we the people."
It's pretty incredible. They really took the exact same language from the two documents because, again, the U.S. Constitution is one of the most well-written documents in human history. So why fix what's already perfect?
Exactly. And plus, you know, our Bill of Rights was so important to us as citizens. That's why your anti-federalists fought for those Bill of Rights to be included in the Constitution. In this situation, for the Florida state Constitution, they actually made the Declaration of Rights in Article 1. And, you know, I think that was quite important. They were making a statement by us putting this first. We're showing you that it's important that the people have their rights.
Correct, exactly right. And also, we want to make sure, and again, guys, where Ms. Hall was talking about right here, if you want to go through and read about some of those rights again, you'll see them right here. Again, the Declaration of Rights. Also, we want to make sure we cover this right here because it's essential and it's really important. This is political power, and all political power is, guys, it says political power is inherent in the people. Our power and our government comes from our people.
All right, and with, you know, basic rights, we know those basic rights, but that includes everyone, not just males, not just females, but male and female.
Correct, and they're inalienable, which means they cannot be taken away.
Of course, without due process.
Without due process, yes, exactly right, which we covered in one of the previous chapters. I believe that was chapter 9, correct? Okay, cool. Scroll on down to the next part right here.
Okay, so, you know, here is where we're getting into the similarities of the structure of how your federal government is organized and how your state is organized. And, of course, your federal government is broken into 3 different branches, just like your state government is.
And even really your local government is broken into 3 branches too, which I know we're going to cover in a moment, but they're all broken into that. So it's pretty cool if you think about that. They're all set up essentially the same way.
It's like everybody has their job, their position.
Exactly.
So that, you know, if you look in this section here, it gives you a nice little chart showing you here's your setup for the federal government. Here's your setup for the Florida state government. So you look at the legislative branch across there, and you can see that, of course, Senate and House of Representatives. Here, the same thing for the state, Senate and House of Representatives. These are completely different senators. These are completely different representatives. The difference is these guys here in Florida actually work in Tallahassee. The ones at the federal level representing our state work in D.C.
Yep. And right here for executive, again, it's similar to what Ms. Hall is saying. Again, you have your vice president and, of course, your president and the appointed cabinet members. The opposite side right here, the governor is the equivalent of the president. However, the governor works in the state of Florida specifically, or one of the different states, of course. And again, they work in different areas. They work in Tallahassee versus in Washington, D.C. And then you have your lieutenant governor. It's the equivalent of the vice president. And you have the elected cabinet members here, just like you have, again, appointed cabinet members here.
Mm-hmm. And again, don't forget, with the executive branch at the federal level, your Senate actually must approve the appointments of the president.
Mm-hmm. Exactly right. And of course, even the judicial branch is a little bit different. You guys are going to see right here, there is 4 different levels of the court versus, again, in the federal, there are 3 different levels of the court. Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
There we go. Mm-hmm.
Now, getting into a few more differences in between the U.S. and the Florida Constitution, there's some major things. If you actually were to look at the 2 documents side by side, the Florida Constitution is way thicker than your U.S. Constitution because, of course, again, with the 10th Amendment saying anything not listed in the Constitution goes straight to the states, well, trust me, there's a lot of things that weren't listed. So elections and voting, state finances and taxation, which Florida is well known for being a state that prohibits a state tax. And so that's why you have all these New Yorkers and Californians actually flocking to Florida. It talks about the setup of the local government and, of course, public education. Now, in the Florida Constitution, it'll actually talk about the details of universities in the state as well.
Correct. And one thing I want to say, I know Miss Rose, Miss Hall, and myself, we're trying to think of a way to help you remember this, and some of you have really found this helpful. The way I remember it, my brain, again, works on tricks, but every teacher loves effort right here. If you need a way to remember this because you're having a little bit of difficulty with it, that is one potential way. Of course, there's other ways that you guys, I'm sure, can do, but again, every stands for election, teacher stands for taxation, again, love stands for local government, and effort, again, stands for education. These are really essential parts that you guys have to remember.
Okay. So we did talk about the differences. It's quite interesting that your Florida Constitution does state that English is the official language, while your U.S. Constitution has not officially accepted English, even though it's the most widely used language. And we get into the specifics that I just spoke about.
And also, we really want you guys to know, and I know it's really important to me as somebody who's recently started making a paycheck. Again, Florida prohibits the collection of state income taxes or inheritance taxes. So that's really important, and it will be important to you guys in a few years whenever you start having to pay taxes. Again, Florida, you don't have to pay taxes for specifically.
Mm-hmm. So amending the Constitution federally versus via Florida, you have more options when it comes to how to propose a bill in the state of Florida. You've actually got 5 different ways, and we were scared to really go into the detail and asking you to memorize that because it is quite a bit of information. But I think that if you can actually see that there is at least a difference in regards to the number of ways in doing so. Mm-hmm. As far as adopting the document or the bill, there's 2 different ways.
And again, guys, we really want you to know for this, I wouldn't necessarily focus on memorizing all of these different things, as Ms. Hall's saying, but you have to know that there are 5 different ways that you can propose an amendment. There are 5. So again, that portion right here at the top, that is essential for you guys to know.
Okay. Sorry. It's okay.
Do you want to go anything on adoption?
Mm-mm.
Okay. Oh, shoot. I went too far. Sorry, guys.
Okay, so the lawmaking process, this just kind of goes into how your legislators meet. When it starts talking about in session or that they meet for regular sessions starting on a certain date, session just means that's when they're actively in the Capitol working on passing and making laws. The governor, of course, very similar to the president, has got to sign the bills or he can veto within 7 days if Congress is in session.
And again, guys, I want you to focus right here, too, on this term right here. Again, this is just meaning that it's not in session. So the meeting is adjourned. It's no longer in session. It's over.
Okay, so local government, of course, this is the one that I said is can be tough because a lot of people aren't always as interested in your local. But we talked about how your local governments run, and we've got 67 counties, and we talked about how each county kind of runs their own schools. They have their own laws. We talked about municipal governments where, like in Gulf Breeze, they're still a part of Santa Rosa County. However, they've basically become their own city. They run it. They have their own police department, etc. But overall, you're still looking at three basic forms of local government. And we talked about the mayor-council form. Focus on the titles. That's going to really tell you what's involved. Mayor-council is going to say that there is a mayor and there is a council involved.
Exactly right. And if you wouldn't mind me jumping in really quick.
Sure.
Again, like we said earlier in the video, at really any level of government, again, you have your executive branch, you have your legislative branch, and you have your judicial branch. So right here, you're going to see the executive branch at this level is the mayor. And the legislative branch at this level is, again, city council. So that's a really important distinction that we want you guys to be able to recognize whenever you're taking your EOC or taking this upcoming exam.
And if you notice right here, even at a mayor level, they have a veto power.
Yes.
So that's kind of interesting.
It's very interesting.
Now, the most popular form, this is the one that I can actually remember because, council, manager. The big thing about this is, of course, your lawmakers are going to be your council, but the council actually gets to select who they want to manage the city. And because they're selected and not elected, they can actually be fired. Okay, so that actually gives the city council a little bit more power, and it allows them to be able to figure out who's going to be best for that position.
So now we have to move on, unfortunately, to the less popular form, and the one that I think is a little bit more difficult for you guys to remember. And that, of course, is this commission form right here, guys. So what you're going to have to know about this, guys, is, first of all, it does not divide the legislative and executive branch. Instead, it's split into departments. Now, these departments, again, as you're going to see, are called commissioners. And they meet regularly and are called the commission. So collectively together, again, they're called the commission. Also, right here, they really have no clear leadership, and often these people really have a difficult time meeting the goals that they want. So it can obviously be very, very difficult for these groups.
Right. I mean, how do you determine which department goals are more important? Very difficult. We did mention special districts, and of course, special districts have to deal with, and Florida is a prime example, when you have a situation where, let's say, for instance, the water shortages. What they'll do is they'll divide the state up into 5 huge districts. And if, let's say, for instance, you're in Zone B may be having a water shortage. Therefore, in that situation, they may be limited to watering their grass only once or twice a week. They would be told specifically which days they're allowed to water. So special districts are basically created to help pay for certain issues that come up, whether it's mosquito eradication or what.
Exactly right. So really quick, we want to go over this very last section, and we appreciate you guys listening to this whole video, and we were really excited to make it. But we're on the last section right now. And we want to talk about, first of all, the federal government. Now, the federal government primarily takes of things that affect the entire nation as a whole. For example, let's just say you want to form a treaty with another nation, or you have to go to war with another nation. That's something that's going to affect everyone in the country. So that really has to be the federal government that deal with it. You want to add anything to that?
Yes, but again, keep in mind, these are obligations. These aren't choices that the federal government has to do. These are requirements that they're supposed to be doing. Their job is to work with other nations, keep our country safe, etc. Now, at a state level, it's still, they've got obligations. They pass laws regulating businesses, maintaining state highways. creating statewide driving rules. So there's a lot of things that the state is required to do, and most importantly, education.
Sure. And just to be clear too, and I know we really want to stress this right here because it's obviously important too. Obviously, education goes in there too. We want to make sure, again, that's a really important point that you guys have to know. And again, state utilities. Now, the last point right here is local government, and this operates public schools, manages local police and fire departments, and oversees sewage and garbage. So these are the things that affect your local government. They're the things that affect the areas directly around you. So again, It's a local government that's going to treat it. Now, I have one question for you, Hall. Would the local government be part of the reserve powers too?
Well, the reserve powers are reserved for the state, and the state in the Constitution is going to break down the local, how local governments are supposed to be run. So it'll be very specific in how it's stated, how they work.
Okay.
I don't know if that's answering your question.
I think that answers the question again. So again, they're going to state it in the state Constitution. So is there anything else you want to add before we wrap it on up?
No, the only thing I would say with local is in regards to education, you've got a superintendent that is there to oversee all the schools in the county just to make sure that they're following the rules and standards of the state. Okay?
Exactly. All right, guys. Well, we appreciate you again listening to this video. Again, we're looking forward to see how you guys do on the test. I guess we'll wrap it on up.
Okay. Have a good one. Thanks.
Talk to you later. Bye.